Vanessa's text came through at 11:15. 3 words that changed everything. Newark, tonight. Confirmed. I stared at my phone in the dim interior of my Honda, parked 3 blocks from the port warehouses. 6 months of chasing rumors about human trafficking operations moving through New Jersey, and finally someone on the inside had talked. Vanessa Cole was the best investigative partner I'd worked with in 5 years of freelance journalism. And if she said it was confirmed, bodies were about to move through that warehouse tonight. The recording equipment felt heavy in my jacket pocket. Tiny camera clipped to my lapel. Digital recorder no bigger than a lipstick tube. I'd spent $800 I didn't have on gear that would capture evidence even in low light. My Queens apartment's rent was already 2 weeks late. But some stories were worth the risk. I climbed out of the car and pulled my black jacket tighter against the November cold. The port sprawled before me like a maze of shipping containers and rusted metal, shadows pooling in every corner. Perfect place for crimes nobody wanted to see. My boots made soft sounds on broken pavement as I approached the warehouse Vanessa had specified. Number 47, southeast corner, second building from the water. I could smell the water from here. Brackish bay air, diesel, and something rotting. The side door was unlocked like she'd promised. I slipped inside and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Stacks of wooden crates filled the space, creating corridors and dead ends. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Male, speaking a language I didn't recognize at first, then caught enough to place it. Japanese. I moved between the crates, phone recording audio, camera capturing everything the darkness would allow. The voices grew louder, angrier. I crouched behind a pallet of machinery parts and peered through a gap. 4 men stood in a circle of harsh light from a single overhead bulb. 3 wore dark clothing that screamed organized crime, movements precise and controlled. The 4th man was on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood already streaming from his nose. One of the standing men spoke in accented English. "You think you negotiate with Russians and we don't find out? You think we're stupid?" The kneeling man shook his head frantically. "No, please, You were just betraying your own family." The speaker pulled a gun from his waistband. No silencer. No hesitation. This is what happens to traitors. I should have run. Should have turned off my equipment and gotten out before they saw me. But I'd been chasing stories about organized crime since my mother died in a gang shooting when I was 16. 10 years of watching violence destroy families, and I'd never been this close to documenting it firsthand. I raised my phone slightly, making sure the camera had a clear angle. The flash of the muzzle burned into my retinas. The sound crashed through the warehouse like thunder. The kneeling man collapsed, blood spreading beneath him in the harsh light. My hand trembled, but I kept recording. Got photos of their faces, their postures, the casual way they stepped over the body. Evidence that could actually put these men away if I could. A hand clamped over my mouth from behind. I tried to scream, but the grip was iron. Another hand seized my wrist, twisting until I dropped my phone. I kicked backward, connected with someone's shin, heard a grunt of pain. Then there were more hands, more bodies, dragging me upright and spinning me around. The 3 men from the execution stared at me with cold calculation. The one who'd pulled the trigger still held his gun, now pointed at my chest. "Well," he said slowly, "this is unfortunate. My recording equipment. They'd find it in seconds. I was dead." This was how investigative journalists died, chasing stories into places they didn't belong. "Run," one of them said to the others. "Clean this up. I'll handle." Footsteps pounded from another entrance. Shouts in Italian this time. The 3 men turned, weapons rising, and suddenly the warehouse erupted into chaos. Men in dark suits poured in from multiple directions. Not police. Something worse. The Yakuza soldiers opened fire but were outnumbered 3-1. I hit the ground and covered my head as bullets tore through crates around me. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. When the shooting stopped, the 3 Yakuza soldiers were either dead or fleeing. Strong hands grabbed my arms and hauled me to my feet. A man in an expensive charcoal suit stood before me, dark eyes assessing like I was a problem he needed to solve. "Give me everything," he said. His voice was calm despite the violence. "Phone, camera, recorder. Now." "I'm a journalist. You can't. I can, and I will. He gestured, and someone patted me down with professional efficiency, finding every piece of equipment I'd hidden. My phone, my recorder, even the backup SD card in my jacket lining. They dragged me outside to a black SUV. I tried to fight, but there were too many of them. And they moved with the kind of coordination that said they'd done this 1,000 times. The SUV's doors slammed shut, and we were moving before I could process what was happening. The man in the charcoal suit sat across from me. He pulled out my phone and began systematically deleting files. Another man beside him had a laptop typing rapidly. Cloud backups? The suited man asked. Deleted, the laptop man confirmed. All of them. My stomach dropped. Months of work. Gone in seconds. Who are you? I demanded. Someone you should never have seen. He set my phone down and studied me. What's your name? Lauren Mitchell. Well, Lauren Mitchell, you've complicated an already delicate situation. We drove north for what felt like hours. I watched the city lights fade into darkness. Highways becoming back roads. Civilization giving way to forest. When we finally stopped, I saw a large house silhouetted against mountains I recognized as the Catskills. They led me inside. Not roughly, but firmly. The house was warm, well-furnished, clearly expensive. A safe house for someone with serious resources. The man in the charcoal suit gestured to a chair. Sit. I sat. Mostly because my legs were shaking and I didn't trust them to hold me up any longer. My name is Lucas Caruso, he said. And you just witnessed members of the Yamaguchi Gumi Gumi executing one of our associates. Do you understand what that means? Your associate was working for them? Was being the operative word. Lucas leaned against a desk. Here's your situation, Miss Mitchell. The Yakuza can't know we have a witness to that execution. There's a truce between our organizations that's kept the peace for 5 years. If they discover you exist, they'll assume we're building a case against them, and that truce collapses into a war that kills dozens of people on both sides. So let me go. I won't tell anyone. You're a journalist who came equipped to document organized crime. Forgive me if I don't trust your word. He paused. Besides, the Yakuza saw you. They're looking for you right now. If we release you, you're dead within a day. The door opened, and another man entered. Taller, early 30s, with dark wavy hair and eyes so brown they looked black in the lamplight. He wore a black suit with the shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a thick gold chain. A thin scar ran vertically down the right side of his neck, white against tanned skin. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. This is her? He asked Lucas. This is her. The man moved closer, studying my face like he was memorizing it. Lauren Mitchell, 26. Freelance journalist specializing in organized crime, lives in Queens. Lost your mother to gang violence at 16. Am I missing anything? How do you... I make it my business to know everything about problems that walk into my territory. He sat in the chair across from me. My name is Marco Bellini. You're in my house, under my protection, because if I'd left you to the Yakuza, you'd be dead by now. But that protection comes with conditions. What conditions? You stay here. You don't leave. You don't contact anyone. You don't publish anything about what you saw tonight. Not because I'm threatening you, but because both of our lives depend on the Yakuza never knowing you exist. I stared at him. You're kidnapping me. I'm keeping you alive. His expression didn't change. The Yakuza are looking for a witness. If they find you, they kill you to eliminate evidence. If they discover I have you and didn't turn you over, they declare war on my family. So we're both trapped by the same problem, Miss Mitchell. The question is whether you're smart enough to understand that. My hands clenched into fists. I have a life, an apartment, work. You can't just... I can, and I have. He stood. Lucas will show you to your room. We'll discuss the details of your situation in the morning when you've had time to process reality. He walked out without looking back. Lucas gestured toward a staircase. This way, Miss Mitchell. I followed because I had no other choice. My equipment was gone, my evidence deleted, my freedom stripped away by a man who spoke about truce and war like they were business negotiations. I was a prisoner in the Catskills, held captive by a Mafia boss who insisted he was protecting me. And the worst part was, I believed him. Wednesday morning arrived with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. I'd barely slept, kept awake by the reality that I was a prisoner in a stranger's house. The bedroom was nice enough. Queen bed, private bathroom, mountain views. But luxury didn't change the locked doors or armed guards I'd spotted patrolling the grounds. Someone knocked around 8. I opened the door to find Lucas holding a breakfast tray. "Morning, Miss Mitchell. May I come in?" I stepped aside. He set the tray on the desk. Coffee, eggs, toast. Real food, not prison rations. "Mr. Bellini asked me to explain your situation more thoroughly," Lucas said, settling into the armchair. "You deserve to understand what you've walked into." I sat on the bed, wrapping my arms around myself. "Start with the truce you mentioned. 5 years ago, the Bellini family and the Yamaguchi Gumi were heading toward open warfare over territory disputes. Marco had just taken leadership after his father was assassinated. He was 20 years old, untested, surrounded by people who expected him to fail. Lucas poured coffee into 2 cups, handed me one. Instead of escalating, he negotiated. Drew clear boundaries. The Yakuza controls certain operations, we control others. Nobody crosses those lines. Violence stays minimal. Profits maximize for everyone. And the man who died last night was negotiating with our rivals while pretending loyalty to both sides. The Yakuza executed him as a message. Marco knew it was coming, didn't interfere. That's how the truce works. Each side polices its own. I sipped the coffee. Strong, bitter, exactly what I needed. Until I showed up with a camera. Until you documented it, yes. Now the Yakuza knows a witness exists. If they discover Marco has you and didn't turn you over, they'll assume he's building a case to destroy them. 5 years of peace collapses and people die. Lots of people. So what happens to me? Lucas met my eyes. That depends on how smart you are. This isn't a negotiation, Miss Mitchell. You can't bargain your way out with promises you won't talk. We destroyed your evidence, but you still saw what you saw. The only thing keeping you alive right now is that the Yakuza doesn't know where you are. My hands tightened on the coffee cup. I have a life, an apartment, work that pays my rent. You can't just make me disappear. We already have. Your phone, may I have it, please? I'd forgotten they'd left it in my jacket pocket. Lucas held out his hand and I reluctantly gave it over. He powered it on, scrolled through notifications. 14 missed calls from Vanessa Cole, 11 text messages, 3 from your landlord about late rent. He looked up. Marco will show you these messages in a few days, let you see that people are looking for you, but you won't be able to respond. Not yet. Why are you telling me this? Because you're a journalist. You understand patterns, motivations, the bigger picture. Lucas set the phone aside. This situation isn't Marco punishing you. It's him protecting both of you from a war neither of you wants. Over the next 3 days, I learned the rhythms of the house. Guards change shifts every 12 hours. Lucas worked from a downstairs office, always professional, always watching. Marco himself was harder to pin down. Glimpses of him in hallways. Phone calls conducted in Italian behind closed doors. I spent hours staring out windows at the Catskill Mountains, trying to process how completely my life had derailed. 10 years of building a career documenting organized crime, and one night had turned me from observer to captive. Thursday evening, Marco found me on the back porch. I'd discovered the guards would let me outside as long as I stayed within sight of the house. "Cold night to be outside," he said. "Needed air that doesn't smell like prison." He leaned against the railing beside me. "This isn't a prison. Try leaving and see what happens." "Fair point." He was quiet for a moment. "Lucas says you understand the situation now. I understand I'm collateral damage in someone else's war. You're a complication, not damage. There's a difference." Marco studied the darkening sky. "Why did you become a journalist?" The question caught me off guard. "Why does that matter?" "I'm curious. You chase stories about organized crime. That's not exactly safe work." I thought about lying, giving him some sanitized answer. But what was the point? My mother was killed when I was 16. Wrong place, wrong time. 2 gangs shooting at each other outside a convenience store, and she took a bullet meant for someone else. The police investigation lasted 3 days before they filed it away as unsolvable. Another dead body in a poor neighborhood, not worth their time. So you became a journalist to do what the police wouldn't, to expose the truth, to make people see what violence actually costs. I glanced at him. You're part of what killed her, people like you. I know. No defensiveness, no justification, just acknowledgement. My father was murdered when I was 17, shot twice in a restaurant parking lot by a rival family. My brother had been killed 2 years before that in a confrontation I still don't fully understand. I inherited this life, Miss Mitchell. I didn't choose it, but you stayed in it, built it. That was a choice. It was. By 17, I'd lost everyone who could have shown me another path. The family needed leadership, or it would collapse into chaos that would have killed dozens more. So I learned fast, made hard decisions, and survived long enough to become the man sitting here now. There was something in his voice. Not quite regret, but acknowledgement of weight carried. I'd expected a Mafia boss to be arrogant, dismissive, maybe violent. Marco Bellini was none of those things. Calculated, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But not the monster I'd built in my head. We're not that different, he said quietly. You documented violence trying to stop it. I control violence trying to minimize it. Both of us shaped by losing people we loved to worlds we couldn't control. Don't compare us. I've never killed anyone. No. But you've written stories that exposed people, destroyed lives, sent people to prison. You think your hands are clean because you used words instead of bullets? He stood. Violence takes many forms, Miss Mitchell. At least I'm honest about mine. He walked back inside, leaving me alone with thoughts I didn't want to examine too closely. Friday afternoon, Lucas burst into the living room where I'd been reading. His face was tight with concern. We have a problem. Someone in our organization leaked information to the Yakuza. They know we have a witness. My stomach dropped. How? We're investigating. But the damage is done. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Marco needs to know immediately. Within an hour, the house transformed. More guards arrived. Windows were checked, security systems upgraded. Marco and Lucas held tense conversations in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. That evening, Marco found me in my room. Tomorrow I meet with the Yakuza commander. They're demanding answers about you. Are you going to give me up? Not if I can avoid it. He sat on the edge of the desk. But you need to understand what's at stake. If they force my hand, this truce dies, and people on both sides start killing each other. I'll do everything I can to protect you. But I won't lie about the cost. Why protect me at all? You don't know me, because turning you over to be executed proves I'm exactly the monster you think I am. And despite what you believe, I'm trying very hard not to be that man anymore. His dark eyes held mine. Besides, there's something about you. The way you look at the world, document it, try to change it. You're brave in ways I haven't been in years. My breath caught. The air between us felt charged, weighted with something neither of us would acknowledge. Get some sleep, Marco said, standing. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. After he left, I lay awake counting hours until dawn, wondering how a man who terrified me could also make me feel safer than I'd felt in years. Saturday morning shattered any illusion of safety I'd built over the past days. Marco left the house at dawn with Lucas, both wearing expressions I'd learned to recognize as dangerous. When they returned 3 hours later, the air itself felt different, heavier. Marco's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping, and Lucas immediately disappeared into his office without a word. I found Marco standing by the windows in the living room, staring at the mountains like they held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. What happened? I asked. He didn't turn around. Commander Takeshi, the regional Oyabun of the Yakuza, knows I have you. He's demanding a meeting to discuss terms. Terms for what? Your execution. His voice was flat, emotionless. The kind of tone someone uses when they're trying not to feel anything at all. He wants proof that I'm not using you as evidence against his organization. Proof of loyalty to our truce. My legs went weak. I grabbed the back of a chair for support. You told him no. I told him I needed time to consider. Marco finally looked at me, and the exhaustion in his eyes was palpable. He gave me 72 hours. Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, in a neutral warehouse. I'm to execute you myself while his men film it as proof. The room tilted. That's insane. You can't. He believes I'm protecting you because I want leverage against him, that I'm planning to destroy the truce and use your testimony to expose Yakuza operations. By demanding I kill you personally, he's testing whether I value peace over one witness. Marco moved closer. If I refuse, I prove his suspicions right. War starts immediately. I forced myself to breathe, to think like the investigative journalist who'd spent years analyzing organized crime patterns, instead of the terrified woman who'd just been handed a death sentence. We fake it, I said. Stage the execution. I play dead. You get me out afterward. Takeshi will verify the body himself. He's not stupid, Lauren. He'll check for a pulse, for breathing. He might even put a bullet in you himself just to be certain. Then I disappear. Leave the country. You tell him I escaped before you could, and my entire family becomes a target for letting you slip away. The Yakuza don't forgive that kind of failure. Marco's hands clenched into fists. Besides, they saw you. They have your description. You think you can hide from an organization with international reach? I'll testify. I'll go to the FBI, give them everything about the Yakuza, destroy their operations from the inside, and start a war that kills 50 people in the crossfire. His voice rose for the first time since I'd met him. Do you think the Yakuza will just accept legal prosecution? They'll retaliate against anyone connected to you. My people, your friends, anyone who ever knew your name. Is that what you want? That many deaths on your conscience? I sank into the chair, mind racing through scenarios and finding dead ends in all of them. There has to be another way. I've been looking for one since the meeting ended. Lucas has been working every angle we have. So far, we've found nothing. Marco knelt in front of me, forcing eye contact. I need you to understand something. I'm not giving up. I will find a solution, even if it means burning every bridge I've built over 5 years. But you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this situation has no clean exit. Why? The word came out broken. Why protect me at all? You could hand me over, maintain your truce, keep your peace. I'm nobody to you. His hand came up, cupped my face with surprising gentleness. You're not nobody. You're a woman who spent 10 years documenting violence because you lost your mother to it, who risks her life chasing stories that might save other people's families. That kind of courage is rare in my world, and I'll be damned if I let them execute it just to prove a point. The intensity in his eyes made it hard to breathe for entirely different reasons. Lucas appeared in the doorway. Marco, we need to discuss the infrastructure. Marco stood, composure sliding back into place like armor. We'll talk more tonight. The rest of Saturday crawled by in agonizing slowness. I tried to distract myself with anything. Books, television, staring at walls. But my mind kept circling back to Tuesday night. 72 hours. 3 days to live unless Marco found a miracle. Around dinner time, I heard raised voices from Lucas's office. Italian phrases I couldn't translate, but the anger was universal. Something about the situation was making even calm. Controlled Lucas lose his temper. I found myself pacing my room. Then the hallway. Then downstairs. The guards watched but didn't stop me. Where was I going to run? Into mountains I didn't know. Hunted by both the Yakuza and Marco's people? The house felt like a cage shrinking by the hour. Around 11, I made a decision. Stupid, desperate, but doing nothing felt worse than trying. I slipped out the back door while the guards were changing shifts, ran for the tree line, and made it maybe 200 yards before strong hands grabbed me from behind. Marco spun me around, furious. What the hell are you doing? Getting away from here. Finding my own solution instead of waiting to die. You'll die faster out there. The Yakuza have scouts watching the roads. They'll pick you up before you reach the highway. I shoved at his chest. Then what am I supposed to do? Sit in that house counting down hours, making peace with being executed like some medieval sacrifice. You're supposed to trust that I'm working on this. He grabbed my shoulders. Do you think I'm sleeping? That I'm accepting this as inevitable? I have people calling in favors, reaching out to other families, looking for any leverage against Takeshi. But I need time, and I need you to stop making this harder by doing something reckless that gets you killed faster. I don't want to die. My voice cracked. I'm 26 years old. I have so many stories I haven't told yet. So many things I wanted to do. And I'm going to die because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time documenting violence I couldn't stop. Marco pulled me against him, arms wrapping tight. You're not going to die. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. He pulled back just enough to look at me. I've survived things that should have killed me a dozen times over. I've outmaneuvered rivals, avoided assassinations, built an empire from the ashes of my father's murder. And I will find a way through this. The certainty in his voice made me want to believe him, made me want to trust this dangerous man who held me like I was something precious, instead of a problem to be solved. I'm scared, I whispered. I know. So am I. His thumb brushed my cheek. But fear means we're still fighting. The moment we stop being scared is the moment we've given up. We stood there in the darkness, the forest quiet around us, both of us holding on to something neither of us could name. Then Marco's mouth found mine, desperate and hungry, and I kissed him back with the kind of intensity that comes from knowing time is running out. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Come back to the house. Let me protect you the only way I know how. I nodded, and we walked back together through trees that felt less like escape routes, and more like witnesses to something fragile and doomed. Tuesday night was coming, and we both knew the odds of surviving it were getting slimmer by the hour. Sunday morning felt different. The house had shifted from refuge to war room overnight. Men I'd never seen before arrived in dark SUVs, weapons cases carried inside with military precision. Lucas spent hours on encrypted phones speaking rapid Italian. Marco disappeared into his office for stretches that felt like years. I found him around noon, staring at maps spread across his desk. Blueprints of buildings, aerial photographs, routes marked in red. Planning something? I asked from the doorway. He looked up, exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. Contingencies. If Tuesday goes wrong, I need extraction routes, backup positions, safe houses scattered across 3 states. You're planning for war. I'm planning for survival. He gestured me in, closed the door. I've contacted 4 other families this morning. Requested alliances if the Yakuza move against us. 2 agreed immediately, 1 is considering. The 4th told me I was insane for protecting a journalist over a 5-year truce. Maybe he's right. He's a coward who's never had to choose between principle and pragmatism. Marco rolled his shoulders, tension radiating from every muscle. I've also had Lucas move weapons and personnel to positions around the warehouse Takeshi specified. If I'm walking into an execution, I'm going prepared. You're really doing this, choosing me over peace. I'm choosing what's right over what's easy. He moved closer. Which is something you've done your entire career, isn't it? Documented violence that powerful people wanted hidden, exposed truths that made you a target. You understand the cost of standing on principle. I did. I'd lost job opportunities, been threatened, had sources murdered for talking to me. But this was different. This was dozens of lives, maybe hundreds, balanced against 1 witness nobody would miss except Vanessa. I'm not worth a war, Marco. That's not your decision to make. His hand found mine. We have 48 hours left. However this plays out Tuesday night, I need you to know that protecting you isn't a burden. It's the most certain thing I've felt in years. The weight of those words settled over me like a physical presence. A man I'd known for less than a week was willing to destroy everything he'd built to keep me alive. The rational part of my brain screamed that it was insane, possessive, the action of someone who didn't understand boundaries. But the part that had been alone since my mother died, that had spent 10 years chasing stories because people were safer than relationships, that part wanted to believe him. Stay with me today, I said quietly. Not planning, not strategizing, just with me. Marco studied my face, then nodded. He told Lucas to handle the logistics, and led me upstairs to a library I hadn't discovered yet. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture that smelled expensive, windows overlooking mountains that stretched forever. We talked for hours. Real conversation, not the guarded exchanges we'd had before. He told me about his brother, killed at 19 in a confrontation Marco still didn't fully understand. About his father, murdered in a restaurant parking lot while Marco waited for him to come home. About taking leadership at 20 and feeling like a child playing at being boss until he learned to become the man his family needed. I told him about my mother's funeral, attended by maybe 12 people because everyone she knew was too poor or too scared to take time off work. About my aunts who raised me, stern women who taught me to survive but not how to trust. About becoming a journalist because documentation felt safer than participation, observing violence from behind a camera instead of experiencing it directly. That's why you're so good at it, Marco said. You see patterns other people miss because you're always watching, always analyzing. It's also why you're terrible at asking for help. I'm asking now. Doesn't that count? You're accepting help you didn't ask for. There's a difference. He smiled slightly. You'd rather have died than admit you needed protection. Even now, part of you is trying to figure out how to solve this alone. He wasn't wrong. Every instinct I had screamed to handle my own problems, find my own solutions, never owe anyone anything they could hold over me later. My mother used to say that independence was survival, I said. That the moment you depended on someone, you gave them power to destroy you. She was right, and also completely wrong. Marco shifted closer. Yes, dependence creates vulnerability, but so does isolation. You've spent 10 years protecting yourself from being hurt by never letting anyone close enough to matter. How's that working? Says the Mafia boss who probably has trust issues deeper than mine. Exactly my point. We're both damaged in the same way, just from different angles. His fingers trace patterns on my hand. Maybe that's why this works. We understand the cost of letting someone in. The sun shifted lower, golden light painting the room in amber. Lucas knocked once around 6, delivered food we barely touched, disappeared without comment. The house had gone quiet, guards positioned, preparations complete. Tuesday loomed like a storm we could see coming but couldn't avoid. Around 8, Marco's phone buzzed. He checked it, jaw tightening. Lucas found our leak. Young guy, one of his newer recruits. Yakuza offered him $50,000 to report on my activities. He's the one who told them about you. What happens to him? What do you think happens to traitors? Marco's voice was flat. This world doesn't have courtrooms or appeals. He made a choice, and it cost people their safety, including you. You're going to kill him. I'm going to eliminate a threat before he does more damage. If that offends your journalistic principles, I apologize. But I won't apologize for protecting my family from someone who sold us out for cash. He left the library, returned an hour later. Didn't tell me details. Didn't need to. The blood on his knuckles told me everything. I should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from a man who just committed murder, like it was routine business. Instead, I found myself understanding the brutal logic of it. In his world, betrayal meant death because anything less created weakness that enemies exploited. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with this, I said when he came back. But I understand why you did it. That's all I can ask. He washed his hands in the library's small bathroom, methodical and thorough. 24 hours, Lauren. Then we walk into that warehouse and find out if my plan works, or if we both die trying. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they crystallized something I'd been avoiding since that first night. I wasn't walking into that warehouse as his captive or his responsibility. I was walking in as his partner, someone who'd chosen to trust him despite every instinct screaming otherwise. That night, we didn't discuss strategy or backup plans. We went to his room and made love with the kind of desperate intensity that comes from knowing tomorrow might not exist. His hands memorized my body like he was documenting evidence. My mouth traced every scar, every line, every part of him that had survived when others hadn't. Afterward, lying in the darkness with his heart beating against my back, I whispered the truth I'd been hiding. I don't want to die, but if I have to, I'm glad it's with you. His arms tightened around me. You're not dying. Not on Tuesday. Not ever if I can prevent it. I've survived too much to lose someone who actually matters. Monday morning arrived with cold clarity. Marco met with his people, finalizing positions, reviewing contingencies. I watched from the library as SUVs departed, carrying men who would hide in warehouse beams or position themselves on surrounding rooftops. An army preparing for battle disguised as an execution. Lucas found me around noon. He's going to get himself killed protecting you. You know that, right? I know. I've tried talking him out of it. Not hard enough. Lucas sat heavily. Marco's been building this empire for 12 years. Everything he's accomplished, every alliance he's forged, every enemy he's neutralized. And he's willing to burn it all for someone he's known a week. Then tell him to hand me over. Save his empire. I can't. Because despite how insane this is, it's the most like himself I've seen him in years. Lucas looked at me. He's been playing a role for so long. The calculating boss, the strategic leader, the man who always chooses pragmatism. You reminded him there's more to life than survival, and now he's choosing principle over safety, even if it destroys him. I never asked for that. No, but you inspired it anyway. He stood. If we survive Tuesday, take care of him. God knows he's terrible at taking care of himself. The day crawled toward evening. Marco came to find me as the sun set, turning the mountains blood red against the darkening sky. Ready? He asked. For what? Tomorrow. The warehouse. Whatever comes after. I thought about my mother, shot down in a convenience store parking lot because violence found her anyway. Thought about 10 years documenting pain from safe distances, never getting close enough to be hurt. I'm ready to stop hiding, I said, whatever that costs. Marco pulled me close, and we stood watching darkness swallow the mountains, both of us knowing that Tuesday night would change everything, or end it completely. Tuesday night arrived wrapped in storm clouds that promised violence before we even left the house. Marco found me standing by the window, watching darkness swallow the mountains. He wore all black, suit, shirt, even the tie he rarely bothered with. The gold chain was gone. He looked like he was dressed for a funeral. Maybe he was. It's time, he said quietly. I turned. Lucas waited by the door with 2 guards I recognized from the house. Everyone moved with the kind of calm that came from accepting death as a possible outcome. My hands, I said. They need to look tied. Marco produced zip ties, the plastic kind that cut into skin if you struggled. I'll make them loose, but they have to look real. He bound my wrists behind my back, testing the tightness. Tight enough to convince. Loose enough that I could slip them if I had to. His fingers lingered on my skin. Whatever happens in that warehouse, he said, don't fight me. Don't run. Trust that I know what I'm doing. And if you don't, then we die together, which is better than most people get. The drive took 90 minutes through winding mountain roads. Nobody spoke. Lucas checked his phone constantly, coordinating with people I couldn't see. The 2 guards in front maintained professional silence, hands resting on weapons I tried not to think about. We arrived at 8:45. The warehouse squatted in an industrial area that looked abandoned even before the recession. Rusted shipping containers, broken pavement, security lights that probably hadn't worked in years. Perfect place for an execution nobody would witness. Or a massacre nobody would survive. 3 black SUVs were already parked outside. As we pulled up, men emerged from the vehicles. 6 of them, all wearing dark clothing that screamed Yakuza. They moved with military precision, weapons visible but not yet drawn. One man stood apart from the others. Older, maybe 50, with silver threading his black hair. Commander Takeshi. Even from a distance, his authority was obvious in the way the others deferred to him. Marco climbed out first. Lucas followed, then the 2 guards. I was pulled from the vehicle last, stumbling slightly as they made it look like I was being dragged. Takeshi smiled. Actually smiled, like this was a pleasant social occasion instead of a murder. Mr. Bellini? Punctual as always. Commander Takeshi. Marco's voice was flat, professional. I've brought what you requested. Takeshi's eyes found me. Cold calculation, no emotion. I was a problem being eliminated, nothing more. The witness. Excellent. Shall we proceed inside? The warehouse interior was vast and empty, except for a single metal chair positioned under a harsh overhead light. Someone had staged this carefully. Theatrical. A performance meant to be documented and remembered. They shoved me toward the chair. I didn't have to fake my fear as they tied me down, the metal cold against my back, the light blinding after the darkness outside. My wrists were bound to the chair arms, legs to the legs, completely immobilized. The 6 Yakuza soldiers fanned out in a semicircle behind Takeshi, forming a wall of bodies between us and the exit. All of them had weapons now. Visible threats. Marco, Lucas, and the 2 guards stood isolated, outnumbered, exactly where Takeshi wanted them. "You understand what must happen now," Takeshi said, pulling a Glock from his jacket. He held it out to Marco. "Proof of loyalty. Filmed proof that you choose our alliance over this woman." Marco took the gun, checked the chamber with practiced ease, loaded and ready. Takeshi pulled out his phone, held it up. "For the record, Mr. Marco Bellini executing the witness to our mutual operation, demonstrating his continued commitment to the peace between our organizations." Marco walked toward me. Each step echoed in the vast space. His face was unreadable, the mask of the Mafia boss who'd survived a dozen years of violence through calculated decisions and zero hesitation. He positioned himself behind my chair. The gun came up, cold metal pressing against my temple. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might explode. This was it. The moment where Marco chose peace over principle, where I died to maintain a truce that had kept 50 people from killing each other for 5 years. I closed my eyes, thought about my mother, shot down in a parking lot when I was 16. At least I'd tried to document the violence, expose it, maybe save someone else. That had to count for something. Marco leaned down, mouth close to my ear. His breath was warm against my skin, so quiet that only I could hear. He whispered 3 words. "Forgive me for this." My breath caught. This was goodbye. He was apologizing for what he had to do, for failing to find another way, for... The gunshot shattered my thoughts. But I wasn't dead. Marco spun away from me, the Glock aimed at Takeshi. The bullet had punched through the commander's forehead, spraying blood across the concrete. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, phone clattering beside his body. Chaos erupted. The 6 Yakuza soldiers reached for weapons. Lucas and the 2 guards drew faster, opening fire before the enemy could react. Muzzle flashes lit the warehouse like lightning strikes. The sound was deafening, each shot crashing into my ears until I couldn't hear anything but the constant thunder of gunfire. Men appeared in the warehouse beams above. Marco's people positioned hours ago, raining bullets down on the Yakuza below. 3 men dropped immediately. 2 more tried to find cover, but there was none. The last one got off 2 shots before a bullet took him in the chest. The shooting burned itself out in under a minute. When the shooting stopped, all 6 Yakuza were down, dead or dying. My ears rang. Smoke drifted through the light. Marco was suddenly there, cutting my restraints with a knife I hadn't seen him draw. His hands were steady despite having just killed 7 people. "Can you walk?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He pulled me up and immediately positioned himself between me and the bodies, shielding me from the worst of what he'd done. Lucas shouted something I couldn't hear over the ringing. Marco grabbed my hand and ran, pulling me toward a side exit I hadn't noticed before. The 2 guards flanked us, weapons still drawn, scanning for threats. We burst through the door into pouring rain. The storm had finally broken, water hammering down so hard I could barely see. An SUV screeched to a stop beside us. Marco shoved me into the back seat and dove in after me, covering my body with his as Lucas floored the accelerator. Behind us, the warehouse exploded. Literally exploded, flames erupting from windows as the explosives Marco had planted earlier detonated. The blast rocked our vehicle, but we were already speeding away, putting distance between us and the carnage. I couldn't stop shaking. Marco held me against him, one hand cradling my head, the other checking me for injuries I didn't have. "You're okay," he kept saying. "You're safe. I've got you." The words finally penetrated the shock. I pulled back enough to look at him. "You said forgive me." "I did. I thought you were apologizing for killing me." "No." His thumb brushed my cheek. "I was apologizing for what I was about to do, for making you watch me kill 7 men, for turning you into a witness to a massacre instead of an execution. I knew it would change how you see me." Understanding crashed through me like a physical blow. The whispered apology wasn't about my death. It was about my survival, and what it would cost me to live with what he was capable of. "You planned this from the beginning," I said. "The explosives, the men in the beams, Everything. The moment Takeshi demanded I kill you, I started planning to kill him instead. The truce is over. War starts tonight, but you're alive, and that's all that matters. Lucas drove like we were being chased by demons. Maybe we were. Somewhere behind us, the Yakuza would be regrouping, calling in reinforcements, realizing their commander and 6 men were dead. Marco had just declared war on an organization that had controlled criminal operations for decades. And he'd done it to protect a journalist he'd known for 10 days. I should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from a man who could orchestrate mass murder with such calculated precision. Instead, I pressed closer to him, let him hold me while rain battered the windows, and Lucas drove us into a future that promised only violence and uncertainty. Marco had chosen me over peace, had whispered an apology before committing murder because he knew the cost it would exact on my soul. And somehow, impossibly, that made me trust him more than any promise of safety ever could. Wednesday morning arrived with sirens in the distance and smoke rising from somewhere in the city below. War had officially begun. I woke to the sound of Marco's voice, sharp and commanding in rapid Italian. Through the bedroom door I caught fragments. Orders, coordinates, body counts. The language of retaliation spoken with clinical precision. Lucas appeared around 8 with coffee and news neither of us wanted. 3 of our establishments were hit last night. 2 burned completely. 1 damaged but salvageable. 2 men ambushed leaving the restaurant on 5th. Both dead before backup arrived. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. 2 men. Dead because Marco had chosen to protect me instead of executing me like Takeshi demanded. The Yakuza? I asked. Obviously. Lucas sat heavily. They're making their position clear. Every death, every fire, every attack is them saying Marco made the wrong choice Tuesday night. He did make the wrong choice. I should have died. Don't. Lucas's voice was sharp. Don't make their deaths about guilt when they signed up knowing violence was part of this life. They died because the Yakuza are murderers, not because Marco protected an innocent woman. But I couldn't shake the weight. Those men had families, people who loved them, and they were gone because I'd walked into a warehouse with a camera. Marco found me on the back porch an hour later, staring at mountains that looked different now. Less like refuge, more like prison walls. You heard, he said. I heard. I didn't look at him. How many more will die before this ends? However many it takes. No apology in his voice. The Yakuza started this by demanding your execution. I'm finishing it by making them regret that demand. By destroying them. By defending my territory and my people. Which now includes you, whether you asked for it or not. He moved closer. Last night we hit their heroin distribution warehouse. Burned $2 million of product. This morning we dismantled their extortion operation in Jersey. By tonight, they'll have lost more in retaliation than they cost us. I finally looked at him. Really looked. The man who'd held me in the warehouse, who'd apologized before committing murder, was gone. In his place stood the Mafia boss who'd survived 12 years through calculated violence and zero mercy. I don't recognize you right now, I said quietly. Good. This is who I actually am. The man you met last week was the version of myself I show when peace is an option. This is what I become when war is necessary. His dark eyes held mine. If that's too much for you to accept, say so now. But don't pretend you didn't know what I was capable of. He walked back inside, leaving me alone with the truth that I'd been trying to avoid. Marco Bellini wasn't a good man playing at being dangerous. He was a dangerous man who occasionally chose mercy when it served his purposes. And I'd fallen for him anyway. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of fear and exhaustion. The Catskills house transformed into a fortress. Guards doubled, weapons everywhere. Marco and Lucas worked from the office, coordinating attacks and defenses with the kind of military precision that spoke to years of experience. I tried to help however I could, but mostly I stayed out of the way, watched news reports about mysterious fires and gang violence escalating across 3 states. Listened to Marco give orders that resulted in people dying somewhere I couldn't see. The nightmares started Thursday night. I'd close my eyes and see the warehouse. Muzzle flashes. Blood spreading across concrete. Takeshi's head snapping back as Marco's bullet found its target. I'd wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, heart hammering like I was still tied to that chair waiting to die. Friday morning, I dropped a coffee cup in the kitchen. It shattered, the sound sharp and sudden, and I was on the floor with my hands over my head before I'd consciously processed the noise. Lucas found me there, shaking, unable to stand. He helped me up without comment, cleaned the broken ceramic, handed me water and sat with me until my breathing normalized. PTSD, he said quietly. Happens to soldiers. Happens to civilians who witness violence. Your brain is processing trauma. I'm fine. You're not. And that's okay. He stood. Marco's seen it before in people who survive attacks. Give yourself time. But time felt like a luxury I didn't have. Every day brought new reports of casualties. 3 more Yakuza operations destroyed. 5 of Marco's men injured in retaliatory strikes, 1 critically. The violence was escalating, spreading, consuming everything in its path. Saturday afternoon, I finally confronted what I'd been avoiding. Marco was in his office reviewing surveillance footage when I walked in and closed the door. I can't do this, I said. He looked up, expression carefully neutral. Can't do what? This. Us. Watching you orchestrate murder like it's routine business. Jumping at loud noises because I keep seeing people die. Knowing that every decision you make results in someone's family getting destroyed. My voice cracked. I'm grateful you saved me. But I don't know if I can stay in a world where violence is the only language anyone speaks. Marco stood slowly. Then leave. I'll have Lucas arrange transportation. New identity, money, protection, until the Yakuza situation resolves. You'll be safe. Just like that? You'd let me go. I'd never force you to stay somewhere you don't want to be. That's not protection, Lauren. That's imprisonment. He moved closer. But before you make that decision, understand something. I don't regret Tuesday night. I don't regret killing Takeshi or starting this war. And I don't regret protecting you. If you leave, I'll miss you. But I won't apologize for being exactly who I've always been. His honesty stripped away any illusion I'd been clinging to. This was the choice. Accept Marco as he actually was. Violence, strategy, calculated brutality, or walk away towards safety that felt hollow. I thought about my mother, shot down in a convenience store parking lot. About 10 years documenting violence from safe distances, judging people whose lives I'd never understood. About becoming a journalist because observation felt safer than participation. I spent my whole life judging people like you, I said, writing stories that exposed organized crime without understanding why anyone would choose it. My mother died in your world, and I hated everyone connected to it. But being here, seeing how you operate, watching you minimize violence when you can and deploy it strategically when you must, it's more complicated than I wanted to believe. It is. And I won't pretend otherwise just to make you more comfortable. I moved to the desk where he'd spread documents. Maps, photographs, financial records. Show me what you're working on. Lauren, if I'm staying, I need to contribute. You said the Yakuza structure is complex. I spent years investigating organized crime. Let me help. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or respect. The Yakuza answer to a hierarchy that extends to Japan. Takeshi was a regional commander, but he reported to someone higher. If we can find leverage against his superior, we might end this without total warfare. Over the next hours, Marco and Lucas showed me everything they'd compiled. The Yamaguchi Gumi Gumi operated under a strict Oyabun Kobun system. Father-son relationships that created unbreakable loyalty chains. Commander Takeshi had been nephew to the Kumicho, the overall boss controlling operations from Tokyo. That's why he was so confident demanding your execution, Lucas explained. Family connection gave him power most regional commanders don't have. But family connections cut both ways. I started digging through financial records Marco had obtained through sources I deliberately didn't ask about. Patterns emerged. Money moving through shell corporations. Funds diverted from official Yakuza operations into accounts controlled exclusively by Takeshi. He was stealing, I said, pointing to the discrepancies. 2.3 million over 18 months, disguised as operational expenses but actually going into personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. Marco leaned over my shoulder, studying the numbers. Can you prove it? Give me access to your financial analyst in 2 days. I'll document it thoroughly enough to convince his uncle. Why would his uncle care? Takeshi's dead. Because theft isn't just about money in organizations like this. It's about honor, loyalty, codes that govern everything. If Takeshi was stealing and planning to use that money against his own family, I pulled up another document, this one showing communications Marco's people had intercepted. Look at these. He was making contact with the Shibusawa faction, rival organization. Lucas's eyes widened. He was planning a coup, steal enough money to fund a takeover, eliminate his uncle, install himself as Kumicho, which means his uncle will want to know his nephew betrayed everything the Yakuza stand for. And killing him wasn't just Marco defending himself. It was removing a traitor before he could destroy the organization from inside. Marco pulled me to my feet and kissed me hard. You're brilliant and dangerous, and exactly what we needed. For the first time since Tuesday night, I felt like I was doing something instead of just surviving. The nightmares didn't stop. I still flinched at sudden noises, but having purpose made the fear more manageable. Sunday evening, I compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier. Financial records with clear documentation of theft. Communications proving Takeshi's contact with rival factions. Analysis of his spending patterns showing preparation for violent takeover. It was investigative journalism applied to organized crime internals, and it was some of the best work I'd ever done. Marco reviewed it with Lucas, both of them speaking rapid Italian as they assessed implications. Finally, Marco looked at me. This could end the war before it really begins. If Takeshi's uncle believes this, he'll withdraw support from American operations as punishment for the dishonor. The Yakuza here will collapse without backing from Japan. And if he doesn't believe it, then we keep fighting until one side is destroyed. Marco came to where I sat. But you've given us a chance at ending this without losing dozens more people. That matters, Lauren. What you did matters. Later, lying in bed listening to him breathe beside me, I thought about who I'd been 2 weeks ago. A journalist who documented violence from safe distances. A woman who'd spent 10 years avoiding connection because it felt safer than vulnerability. That version of myself was gone. In her place was someone who'd watched murder, survived execution, and chosen to stay in a world that terrified her, because the alternative felt like giving up on the only person who'd ever made her feel truly seen. The nightmares would continue. The fear wouldn't disappear, but I'd stopped running from the complexity of loving a dangerous man in a violent world, and somehow, impossibly, that felt like the bravest thing I'd ever done. Monday morning, Marco worked with a translator to convert my English dossier into flawless Japanese. Every financial detail, every communication record, every piece of evidence documenting Takeshi's betrayal needed to be perfect. We weren't just exposing theft. We were proving that a trusted nephew had violated every principle the Yakuza claimed to uphold. This has to convince his uncle that killing Takeshi wasn't an act of war, Marco said, reviewing the translation. It was eliminating a traitor before he could destroy the organization from inside. Will it work? I asked. If the uncle values honor over revenge, yes. If he's more concerned with saving face, Marco didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Lucas arranged the delivery through contacts I'd heard mentioned before, but never fully understood. The triad of the Green Dragon operated out of San Francisco, maintaining strict neutrality in conflicts between other organizations. They'd built a reputation as reliable intermediaries, which made them valuable to everyone and threatened by no one. They'll hand-deliver this to Tokyo, Lucas explained, directly to the Kumicho's personal residence. No digital trail, no interception risk. He'll have it within 48 hours. The package left Tuesday morning. Then we waited. Those 10 days felt longer than the previous 2 weeks combined. Every morning brought new reports of violence. The Yakuza weren't backing down just because we'd killed their commander. If anything, Takeshi's death had intensified their retaliation. Wednesday, 2 of Marco's men were ambushed leaving a restaurant in Newark. Both survived, but one took 3 bullets and spent 6 hours in surgery. Marco visited him in the private hospital. Came back hollow-eyed and silent. Thursday. A shipment of legitimate construction materials was intercepted and burned. $50,000 of lumber and steel turned to ash because the Yakuza wanted to prove they could strike anywhere. Friday morning, Lucas got the call nobody wanted. Joey Moretti, one of the guards who'd been wounded Wednesday, had died from complications. Internal bleeding the doctors missed during surgery. He was 28 years old, married, with a daughter who'd just turned 3. I watched Marco take the news standing by the windows, his back rigid with tension. He didn't speak for a full minute. When he finally turned around, the exhaustion in his eyes was devastating. "That makes 3, he said quietly. 3 men dead because I chose to protect you instead of maintaining peace. Marco, I'm not blaming you. I'm counting the cost." He moved to the desk, pulled out his phone. "Joey's family gets full benefits. College fund for his daughter, mortgage paid off, monthly stipend for his wife. Lucas, make sure it's handled today." "Already in motion," Lucas confirmed. The funeral was scheduled for Sunday in Brooklyn. Marco insisted on attending despite the security risk. "Joey died serving my family. The least I can do is show up for his." Sunday morning arrived cold and gray, matching the mood perfectly. We drove to Brooklyn in a 3-car convoy, guards positioned in vehicles front and back. The church was small, brick exterior showing its age, windows covered with security bars that spoke to the neighborhood's realities. Joey's widow sat in the front pew, holding their daughter. The little girl wore a black dress and kept asking in a voice that carried through the whole church when Daddy was coming home. Her mother's attempts to quiet her only made it worse. I'd documented dozens of funerals for my investigative work, photographed grieving families, interviewed widows, written stories about the human cost of gang violence. But sitting there watching that 3-year-old ask for her father, knowing I was part of the reason he was dead, destroyed something inside me. Marco stood when it was time for eulogies. He spoke briefly, describing Joey as loyal, brave, someone who'd made the ultimate sacrifice protecting his family. His voice never wavered, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched between sentences. After the service, Marco approached the widow privately. I watched from a distance as he spoke to her, presumably about the financial arrangements. She nodded, crying, and then did something unexpected. She hugged him. Not the brief, obligatory embrace of formality, but a genuine hug that lasted several seconds. "She thanked me," Marco said when we got back to the car, "for taking care of them, for making sure Joey's death wasn't meaningless." He stared out the window. "I got her husband killed and she thanked me." "You didn't get him killed. The Yakuza did. I gave them reason to strike. That makes me responsible regardless of who pulled the trigger." He was quiet for the rest of the drive back to the Catskills. Monday morning, 10 days after we'd sent the dossier, Lucas burst into the dining room where I was having breakfast. His expression was unreadable. Tokyo responded. Marco appeared from his office so fast he must have been waiting nearby. And the uncle investigated everything, confirmed the theft, the communications with the Shibusawa faction, the planning for a coup. He's furious that his nephew betrayed the organization. Lucas pulled up something on his tablet. "Official statement withdraws all support from Yakuza American operations, effective immediately. As punishment for the dishonor Takeshi brought to the family name, he's ordering complete evacuation of Northeastern Territory." The silence that followed was profound. Marco sat heavily in the nearest chair. "It's over?" I asked. "The war is over," Lucas confirmed. "The uncle is pulling everyone back to Japan. Without his backing, the American operations can't sustain themselves. They'll scatter, try to rebuild elsewhere. But our territory is clear. At what cost?" Marco's voice was flat. 3 dead, 5 wounded, 2 still in hospital, 4 businesses damaged. Relationships with other families strained because they had to choose sides. And for what? To prove I wouldn't execute an innocent woman? To prove you have principles, I said. That you're more than just calculated violence and strategic decisions. That matters, Marco. He looked at me with exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Does it? Joey's daughter is growing up without a father. 2 other families are burying people they loved. That's the cost of my principles. Lucas left us alone. Marco stood slowly, moved to the windows overlooking mountains that had witnessed everything. "I can arrange your exit now," he said quietly. "New identity? Relocation funds? Protection until we're certain the Yakuza threat is completely neutralized. You'd be free to restart your life somewhere safe. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. You came into this world against your will, watched me commit murder, lived through a war you never asked to be part of. I won't trap you here out of some selfish desire to keep you close." I moved to stand beside him. "What if I want to stay? Then you need to understand what that means. This won't be the last conflict. There will always be rivals, threats, situations that require violence I'd prefer to avoid. I can't promise you safety or peace or any of the things you deserve. I don't need promises. I need terms." I'd been thinking about this for days, planning this conversation. I stay, but I go back to work. Real work, investigative journalism. I'll focus on organizations that don't follow codes, human trafficking operations, exploitation rings, the kind of criminal enterprises that exist just to cause suffering. I'll keep your world and my work separate. And you respect that boundary. Marco studied my face. "You're asking for independence within this relationship. I'm asking for partnership instead of protection. I'm choosing to be here, but I won't be helpless or dependent. That's not who I am." A smile ghosted across his expression, the first I'd seen since Joey's funeral. "Deal. But the moment you're in danger, those boundaries disappear, and I do whatever's necessary to keep you alive. I wouldn't expect anything less." He pulled me close, and we stood watching mountains that had witnessed our entire impossible story. From captive to partner. From enemy to something neither of us had names for yet. The war was over. The Yakuza were retreating. 3 men had died and 5 more carried injuries they'd never fully recover from. But we had survived. And somehow we had found something worth the cost. 6 months changed everything about my life except the nightmares. They still came sometimes. Usually when stress ran high or I worked too late. I'd wake gasping, sheets twisted around my legs, seeing muzzle flashes and blood spreading across concrete. But they were less frequent now. Manageable. The kind of scars you learn to live with instead of letting them destroy you. My apartment in Queens looked exactly as I'd left it that Tuesday night in November when I'd driven to Newark chasing a story. Same narrow kitchen, same water stain on the ceiling, same view of buildings that had seen better decades, but now it was a choice instead of necessity. I could afford better, but something about keeping this place felt important. A reminder of who I'd been before Marco Bellini turned my world inside out. I spent maybe 3 nights a week here. The rest of the time I was in the Catskills or occasionally at Marco's Tribeca place when business required him in the city. We'd settled into a rhythm that worked for us. Separate spaces that occasionally overlapped. Independence within intimacy. Partnership instead of possession. The investigative series I'd written with Vanessa had just been nominated for a Pulitzer. 4 parts documenting human trafficking operations running through West Coast ports, deliberately far from Marco's northeastern territory. We'd spent 3 months researching, another 2 writing, and the result was some of the best journalism either of us had ever produced. Vanessa had asked exactly 3 questions about my disappearance last November. Where had I been? Was I safe? Was I staying safe? I'd answered truthfully within the boundaries I could maintain. With someone. Yes. Working on it. She'd accepted the limitations because 10 years of friendship had taught her when to push and when to respect walls. "This guy you're with," she'd said over coffee last month. "He's the reason you look different now. Less like you're documenting life and more like you're actually living it. Is that good or bad? It's different. And honestly, you seem happier than I've ever seen you, even if you won't tell me details." She'd studied me over her cup. "Just promise me that if you're ever in trouble, you'll call." "I promise." She'd nodded, dropped the subject, and we'd moved on to discussing interview techniques for trafficking survivors. Some boundaries existed to protect everyone involved. The territory war had ended cleaner than anyone expected. The Yakuza's complete withdrawal from the Northeast left a power vacuum that Marco filled strategically, absorbing some operations and shutting down others. 3 other families had tried testing his strength in the months after, but Marco had handled them with the same calculated precision he'd used on everything else. No one wanted war with a man who'd destroyed the Yamaguchi Gumi Gumi over a witness most people would have sacrificed without hesitation. I'd asked him once if he regretted it. The 3 deaths, the 5 injured, the businesses burned. He'd thought for a long time before answering. I regret the cost. I'll always regret that Joey Moretti's daughter is growing up without her father, but I don't regret the choice. Some principles are worth fighting for, even when the price is high. That was Marco in a sentence. Willing to pay costs most people couldn't imagine, but never pretending those costs didn't matter. Today was Saturday, and I'd driven up to the site where everything had started. The warehouse in Newark where I'd witnessed an execution, where Marco's men had intercepted me before the Yakuza could, where my entire life had pivoted on a decision I hadn't even known I was making. It was gone now. Demolished 3 months ago. Replaced by an empty lot waiting for developers who'd probably never come. The neighborhood was too far gone, too associated with violence and industrial decay. Nobody wanted to invest here. I stood on cracked pavement, camera hanging unused around my neck, trying to remember the person I'd been that Tuesday night. So certain that documentation mattered more than participation. So convinced that keeping distance was the same as staying safe. A car pulled up behind me. I knew the engine sound by now. Marco climbed out and came to stand beside me, hands in his jacket pockets, following my gaze to the empty lot. "You didn't tell me you were coming here," he said. "Decided this morning. Wanted to see it one last time before they build over it. They're not building. City's condemning the whole block." He studied my face. "Why come at all?" I thought about how to answer. This is where I died, in a way. The person I was before, who thought she had everything figured out. She ended that night, and someone else took her place. Someone better? Someone braver? Or maybe just someone who stopped confusing caution with wisdom. I turned to face him. I keep thinking about my mother. She died in a parking lot because 2 gangs decided that block belonged to them. Random violence that destroyed my family. For years, I blamed everyone in your world for what happened to her. And now? Now I understand it's more complicated. You didn't kill her. People like you, some of them minimize violence, maintain codes, try to keep civilians out of crossfire. Others don't care. She died because the ones who killed her valued territory over human life. I paused. You would never have let that happen. You'd have handled the dispute differently. You're giving me credit I don't deserve. I'm acknowledging complexity I used to refuse to see. I took his hand. My mother would have hated that I'm with you. But she also taught me to think for myself. Question assumptions. Never let anyone else define my reality. So maybe she'd understand. Marco pulled me closer. That night in the warehouse, when I whispered "forgive me," I genuinely believed you'd never forgive what I was about to do. That watching me kill 7 men would destroy whatever was building between us. It almost did. I had weeks where I couldn't reconcile the man who held me with the man who orchestrated that massacre. I rested my head against his chest, but you didn't do it casually. You did it to protect me, knowing it would cost you peace. That mattered more than the violence itself. We stood in the lot where everything had changed, holding each other while traffic moved past, and the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Eventually, Marco checked his phone and sighed. "Lucas needs me back. Some situation with the construction union contract. Always something. Always." He kissed my forehead. "You coming back tonight or staying in Queens?" "Back. I've got editing to finish, and your office has better internet." We drove separately, his SUV leading while I followed in my Honda. The route north was familiar now. Highways becoming back roads, becoming mountain curves that still took my breath away. By the time we reached the Catskills house, afternoon was fading into evening. Lucas was waiting in the office, surrounded by papers and looking more stressed than usual. He brightened slightly when he saw me. "Lauren, good. Maybe you can talk sense into him." "About what?" "He wants to personally handle a negotiation with the Santoro family. I'm saying send someone expendable in case it goes bad." Marco rolled his eyes. "The Santoros respect strength. Sending a subordinate says we're afraid. Sending you says we're stupid if they decide to eliminate competition." I settled into the chair by Marco's desk and pulled out my laptop. "I'm staying out of this one. Business decisions are your department. They argued for 20 minutes in a mix of English and Italian, while I worked on editing an article about police corruption in Baltimore. The investigation had taken 2 months and would probably piss off a dozen people with badges, but the evidence was solid. Sometimes journalism meant making enemies of people who were supposed to be protecting citizens. Eventually, Lucas left with a compromise neither of them seemed happy with. Marco sat heavily in his chair and ran both hands through his hair. "Tell me about your article." I did. Explained the corruption patterns I'd found, the officers taking bribes from drug dealers, the systematic cover-ups. Marco listened with the focus he brought to everything, asking questions that proved he understood both the journalism and the implications. "You're going to need security when this publishes," he said finally. "I know. Already arranging it through a private firm Vanessa recommended. Use my people instead." "Marco, not negotiable. You're investigating dirty cops who probably have connections to organized crime. That makes this my world overlapping yours, which means my resources apply." His tone left no room for argument. "Besides, my people are better trained than any private security firm." He was right, and we both knew it. I nodded acceptance and went back to editing, while he returned to reviewing Lucas's reports. This was us now, working side by side in comfortable silence, our separate worlds occasionally colliding in ways that required negotiation and compromise. I wrote articles that exposed criminal organizations. He ran an empire that operated in moral gray areas I'd learned to acknowledge without fully accepting. It shouldn't have worked. By every logical measure, a journalist and a mafia boss were incompatible. But somehow, impossibly, we'd found a balance. Lucas returned around 8 with takeout from the Italian place in town. We ate at the conference table, discussing everything from Marco's expansion plans to my next investigation, to Lucas's ongoing frustration with the younger generation of recruits. "They think it's like the movies," Lucas complained. "All guns and respect. Don't understand it's 90% boring work and 10% terror." "Sounds like journalism," I said. Marco laughed. "Maybe you two should write a book. Careers that look glamorous but aren't." "I'd buy it," Lucas said seriously. After dinner, Marco and I retreated to the bedroom that had become partly mine over the past months. I'd brought clothes, books, equipment, made space for myself in his world the same way he'd made space for me. Later, lying in darkness listening to him breathe, I thought about the girl I'd been at 16, losing her mother to gang violence, learning to survive through documentation and distance. She'd have been horrified by the woman I'd become, dating a mafia boss, accepting violence as sometimes necessary, choosing imperfect love over safe solitude. But she'd also have understood, because sometimes survival meant adapting, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust someone dangerous enough to protect you from worse dangers. "You're thinking too loud," Marco murmured. "Sorry." His arm tightened around me. "What about? How far I've come from that warehouse. How different everything is now. Better or worse?" I considered. 6 months ago I'd been a captive, terrified, watching a man I barely knew choose my life over peace. Now I was a partner, still occasionally terrified, but choosing to stay with someone who'd proven he valued principle over pragmatism. "Different," I said finally, "and real. For the first time in 10 years, I'm not documenting life from safe distances. I'm living it, consequences and all." "Any regrets?" "About 100. But not about this. Not about us." Marco kissed my temple. "Good. Because you're stuck with me now." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both." I smiled in the darkness and let sleep find me, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories to chase, new reasons to question whether I'd made the right choice. But tonight, held by a dangerous man in a safe house in mountains that had witnessed everything, I was exactly where I chose to be. And sometimes, that was the bravest thing anyone could ask for.